When I bought the old riverfront property 5 years ago, most people thought I was crazy. The land stretched across 40 acres, half forest and half open field, divided from the nearest neighborhood by a deep, winding creek that cut through the valley like a scar. There was one narrow wooden bridge that connected my land to the suburban development on the other side. The bridge was old, hand-built in the 70s, with oak beams and rusted iron bolts, but it worked fine. I used it every day to cross into town, and so did the neighborhood residents who found it quicker than taking the long main road. For years, no one seemed to mind that the bridge sat on my property line. People walked their dogs across it, rode bikes, even jogged in the early mornings, and I didn't care. I liked the peace of it, the quiet exchange between my land and the world beyond. Until one morning that peace ended. It was a Tuesday when I woke up to the sound of machinery, a low grinding noise that didn't belong in my valley. I walked outside and saw a cluster of orange vests and helmets near the creek. A yellow excavator was parked on the opposite bank, its arms swinging lazily above the bridge. My stomach sank. I shouted, "Hey, what are you doing on my property?" One of the workers looked up, confused. "Sir, this area is part of the demolition site," he yelled back. "We're under HOA orders to remove the unsafe bridge." Unsafe? That bridge had held up my truck, my tractor, and even my cattle trailer for years. I stormed down the path, boots thudding against the soil, until I reached the edge of the creek. "I didn't authorize this," I said, pulling out my phone. "This bridge belongs to me. You're trespassing." The man frowned. "You'll have to talk to the HOA, sir. We're just following the work order." And with that, the excavator's bucket came down and splintered the first beam. I felt something snap in my chest, not just anger, but disbelief. Within minutes, they had reduced my bridge to a heap of splintered wood floating down the creek. The water that used to shimmer beneath it was now murky with debris. I recorded everything, every swing, every broken board, and when the noise died, I stood there staring at the wreckage like someone watching their own house burn. That night, I went through every document I had, the deed, the county maps, the property survey. I wanted to be absolutely sure. And there it was in bold lines and signatures. The creek, the bank, and the bridge were all on my side. The only access road connecting the entire neighborhood to the highway ran straight across my land before joining their subdivision. They had torn down my bridge, but they'd also just destroyed their only exit. The next morning, I drove the long way around to the county office. It took me 40 minutes instead of 10. When I got there, I met with a clerk in the land records department, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Parker. "Ma'am," I said, handing her my deed and survey. "I need to confirm property boundaries. My bridge was demolished yesterday by the homeowners association across the creek." She adjusted her glasses and leaned over the papers. "Yes, I see. Parcel 41B, right along the creek. Looks like the bridge and the access road leading to their subdivision both fall entirely within your property line." My heart steadied. "So legally, that road and bridge are mine?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. Unless there's an easement agreement, which I don't see here." "No easement," I said, smiling grimly. "Good to know." I spent the rest of the day filing a report with the sheriff's office for property damage and unauthorized demolition. When the deputy took my statement, he looked both amused and sympathetic. "You mean to tell me they knocked down the only road they use?" "That's right." He chuckled. "Well, this'll be interesting to be why the end of the week. The HOA president herself came knocking. She was a tall woman in a pressed blazer, the kind of person who wore her authority like perfume. Her name was Linda Crawford, and she introduced herself with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Dalton," she began, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. The bridge that was removed had been deemed unsafe by our structural assessor. We took initiative for the safety of our residents." "On my land," I said flatly. She blinked. "Well, the bridge connects to our neighborhood, so naturally—" "No," I interrupted. "It connects my land to your neighborhood. You had no right to touch it." Linda crossed her arms. "We were under the impression that the HOA maintained access rights to that structure." "You were under the wrong impression." I handed her a copy of my property survey, the same one I'd shown the county. This line right here, see it? That's the boundary. The entire bridge is on my side of the creek. Her expression faltered for just a second, then stiffened. I'm sure we can reach an agreement. Perhaps we can work together to rebuild the bridge. Oh, I'll rebuild it, I said. But not for you. The following week, I put up no trespassing signs and a locked steel gate at the entrance to my property, right where the road to their neighborhood began. At first, the residents thought it was temporary. They drove up to the gate, honked, then turned around. Some even walked up to my house to ask what was going on. I explained it simply. Your HOA tore down my bridge. You're using my private road without permission. Until that's settled, the road is closed. Word spread quickly. Within days, the neighborhood was in chaos. The only alternative route was a gravel back road that added nearly 8 miles to every trip. Delivery trucks got lost. School buses couldn't enter. Trash pickup stopped. People began parking on the highway and walking half a mile home. It didn't take long before the angry emails started coming in, not to mention the knocks on my door. Linda came again, this time less confident. Mr. Dalton, we need to talk, she said through clenched teeth. I already told you, Linda. My land. My bridge. You're isolating an entire neighborhood. You demolished my property, I countered. You'll rebuild it under my terms. She exhaled sharply. What do you want? I smiled. You're asking the right question. I laid out my conditions. The HOA would pay for a new steel-reinforced bridge, built to my specifications. They would fund all engineering, labor, and permit costs. Upon completion, the bridge would remain my private property, with controlled access for emergency use only. The HOA would issue a public apology for unlawful demolition and property trespass. Linda looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. That's absurd, she snapped. We'll take this to court. Go ahead, I said, handing her my lawyer's card. We'll see whose land the court thinks you were standing on when you tore down my bridge. The lawsuit dragged on for 3 months. During that time, the neighborhood's frustration boiled over. Residents flooded HOA meetings, demanding explanations. Delivery companies stopped servicing the area. Property values started dropping. Every week, I drive by the gated road and see a line of cars waiting hopelessly, drivers checking their phones, some even glaring toward my house across the valley. I didn't gloat, at least not openly, but I won't lie. Justice felt good. Then one day, Linda showed up again, but this time she was different. Her voice had softened. Mr. Dalton, she said, the HOA board voted to settle. We'll rebuild the bridge. I nodded. Good. Let's put it in writing. The reconstruction began that spring. I hired my own engineer, not theirs, and oversaw every inch of the build. The new bridge wasn't wood this time. It was solid steel and concrete, wide enough for 2 lanes, with reinforced guardrails and a locked gate at both ends. The HOA paid every cent. During construction, Linda tried to negotiate partial access for residents. I refused. You'll get a key for emergency vehicles only, I told her. Otherwise, it stays locked. She frowned but didn't argue. They had no leverage left. When the bridge was finally completed, it gleamed under the sun like something out of a government project, strong, silent, and unmistakably mine. I installed motion cameras, floodlights, and a digital gate system. The HOA tried to frame it as a community improvement in their newsletter, but everyone in town knew the truth. They had paid for my private bridge. For a while, peace returned. The residents used the long road again, grumbling about gas prices, but resigned to their fate. I went back to tending my land, fixing fences, and fishing in the creek. Then one afternoon, about 6 months later, I got a call from a local reporter. Mr. Dalton, I'm doing a story on HOA overreach, she said. I heard you had a unique experience. I laughed. That's one way to put it. She interviewed me for an article titled, The Bridge They Shouldn't Have Touched. It went viral locally, sparking debates online about property rights and HOA abuse. My phone buzzed nonstop for days, people sending messages like, good for you, and wish I could do that to my HOA. Linda, meanwhile, kept her distance. The HOA board quietly replaced her by the end of the year, but the story didn't end there. The following spring, a group of new residents from the neighborhood came to visit. Unlike Linda, they were polite, nervous even. The man in front, probably in his 30s, spoke for the group. "Mr. Dalton," he said, "we know what happened before wasn't right. But we were wondering if you'd consider letting residents use the bridge again, maybe with a toll or agreement." I studied their faces. They weren't entitled like the old HOA board. They were just tired families who'd inherited the mess others created. I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Maybe. But it'll be on my terms. We sat down the next week and drafted a new private access agreement. Each household paid a small monthly fee for maintenance, with clear rules. No modifications, no gatherings, no interference. They signed it gladly. I handed them access cards to the gate. From that day on, things were peaceful again. I'd watch their cars cross the bridge at sunset, careful, respectful, never forgetting the lesson carved into those steel beams. Sometimes I still think about that morning when they tore it down, the sound of wood cracking, the water swallowing years of history. They thought they were asserting control, cleaning up what wasn't theirs. But in doing so, they severed their only lifeline, both literally and legally. In a strange way, I'm glad it happened. Because now, when I stand on that bridge and look at the reflection below, I see more than just steel and water. I see a boundary, not just between properties, but between arrogance and accountability, and every time I cross it, I remember, they tore down my bridge, but they didn't know I owned the road. When I first moved to the valley, the only thing louder than the sound of crickets at night was the creek that ran through the middle of my land. It was the kind of place most people dream of retiring to, tall pines, fog curling off the water every morning, and a winding dirt road that led to the rest of civilization. For 10 years, it was my peace, my retreat from everything noisy and controlling. Then the HOA moved in, across the creek. What had once been farmland was bought by a developer. They built a gated subdivision, Maple Grove Estates, filled with picture-perfect homes, manicured lawns, and rules for everything from mailbox height to grass color. At first, I didn't mind. I kept to my side of the water. They kept to theirs, until they decided that my old wooden bridge was an eyesore. IT started with a letter, neat and polite. "Dear Mr. Walker, as representatives of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association, we have concerns about the deteriorating structure of the bridge adjacent to your property. For safety reasons, we kindly request it be removed or renovated in compliance with community standards." Community standards. I laughed when I read that. My bridge had stood for decades before their cul-de-sac even existed. It didn't comply with anything except gravity, and that had always been enough. I ignored the letter. A month later, they sent another. Then a third. By summer, the tone changed. Failure to remove the bridge within 30 days will result in the HOA taking corrective action. I crumpled the paper and tossed it into the fire pit. They couldn't touch my property. Or so I thought. It happened early one morning, the kind of dawn where the fog still hugs the creek like a blanket. I woke to the distant hum of engines. When I stepped outside, I saw them. 5 men in hard hats, an excavator parked near the edge of the creek, and bright orange cones marking the approach to my bridge. "Hey!" I yelled, running down the path. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" One of them, a foreman-looking guy, waved a clipboard. "Morning, sir. HOA orders. We've been told to remove an unsafe structure." "Unsafe?" I barked. "That's my bridge." He shrugged. "Take it up with the association. We're just following instructions." Before I could stop them, the excavator swung its arm and smashed through the first support beam. The crack echoed through the valley like a gunshot. Birds scattered from the trees. The planks splintered and fell into the rushing water below. I felt something twist inside me. Fury and disbelief and helplessness all at once. I grabbed my phone, filming everything. "You're trespassing on private land," I shouted. "You're going to pay for this." The man only muttered, "Talk to the HOA," before giving the signal for the next strike. In less than an hour, my bridge was gone, reduced to floating shards and a cloud of sawdust drifting downstream. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the deed spread out in front of me. My father had built that bridge himself back in the 1980s. He'd made sure to file for the property line, including the road and the creek banks, all the way to the other side. Every inch of that land, including the path leading to Maple Grove, was mined SO when the HOA demolished the bridge. They hadn't just broken wood. They'd broken the law. I drove into town first thing in the morning. The county office clerk, a patient woman named Brenda, pulled up my file. "Well," she said, tapping the map, "looks like the bridge and the entire access road fall under your parcel, Mr. Walker. The HOA doesn't have an easement or any legal right of passage here. So, if I close it off," I asked, "I'm within my rights." "Completely," she said, smiling faintly. "It's your land." By noon, I had a new sign hammered into the dirt. "Private road. No trespassing. Access by permission only." Then I called a local fencing company. 2 days later, a 12-foot steel gate stood at the entrance, the only way in or out of Maple Grove. I installed cameras, floodlights, and a keypad system that night. I sat on my porch and waited. At 6:45 a.m. sharp, the first car rolled up. Then another. Then a line of them. Dozens of shiny SUVs and sedans stuck behind my new gate. Drivers honked, waved, shouted out their windows. I didn't move. From across the creek, I could see panic starting to spread. Parents were late for work. Kids missed the school bus. Delivery trucks turned around. Eventually, someone called the HOA president. Her name was Margaret Leland, a woman with a stiff smile and a clipboard permanently attached to her hand. She showed up an hour later, wearing heels entirely unsuited for gravel. "Mr. Walker," she said, striding toward me, "what on earth is this?" "This," I said, "is my property. You destroyed my bridge. You've lost your access." "That bridge was unsafe," she snapped. "We were protect our residents. By trespassing and demolishing private property?" She frowned. "We believed it was within the neighborhood's easement." "There is no easement," I said, handing her a copy of my deed. "You can check with the county. You demolished my structure without consent." Margaret's lips tightened. "Be reasonable, Mr. Walker. Do you expect an entire community to stay trapped because of some paperwork?" "Exactly," I said, smiling coldly. "Paperwork that keeps you from stealing what's mine." The next day, I received a letter, this time from their lawyer. It accused me of intentional obstruction of public access and threatened to sue. I sent one back. Counterclaim for property damage, trespassing, and unlawful demolition. Estimated damages, $480,000. That shut them up for a while. Meanwhile, chaos brewed in Maple Grove. Residents couldn't get deliveries. Emergency vehicles couldn't enter. Trash piled up. People had to park on the highway and walk in. And every night, I could see their headlights flickering beyond my locked gate, frustration simmering. A week later, Margaret came back, less confident this time. "Mr. Walker, please," she said, almost pleading. "We can discuss compensation. Maybe we can fund a new bridge together." I leaned against my fence. "Oh, I'm building a new bridge," I said. "But not for you." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I'm rebuilding it on my side of the creek. Private access only. You can find another way out." Her jaw tightened. "You'll regret this." I laughed. "I already don't." Court battle began a month later. They tried every argument imaginable, that the road was essential infrastructure, that they had implied access, that I was maliciously restricting movement. But the law was clear. My property, my bridge, my decision. When the judge finally ruled in my favor, the HOA was ordered to pay full restitution for the demolition and the cost of rebuilding. Nearly $500,000 in damages. Margaret's face went pale when the verdict was read. Construction of the new bridge began in early fall. This time I didn't use wood. I built it out of reinforced steel and concrete, with an electronic gate and surveillance cameras. The HOA had to fund every cent while the crew worked. The Maple Grove residents had to keep using the long gravel back road, 8 miles of bumpy dirt and potholes. I heard some even put their homes up for sale. Property values plummeted. The developer lost money. When the new bridge was finished, I placed a heavy lock on it. Only I had the key. Winter came, and with it, silence. The creek froze at the edges. My bridge stood solid, gleaming with frost. On the other side, Maple Grove looked smaller, a cluster of houses stranded by their own arrogance. Then, one snowy afternoon, a knock came at my door. It wasn't Margaret. It was a young man, probably in his 30s, holding a folder. "Mr. Walker," he said politely. "I'm the new HOA president. Margaret resigned. I wanted to talk about mending things." He handed me a letter of apology, official, signed by every board member. It acknowledged the wrongful demolition, the trespassing, and the damages. He looked tired. "We're just trying to make things right. People are struggling. We'd like to reopen the road, maybe work out a fair agreement." For a moment, I considered slamming the door. But then I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that comes from dealing with messes other people made. "Come in," I said. We sat at my table, the same spot where I'd read those threatening letters a year ago. Over the next few weeks, we negotiated a deal. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about control and fairness. I agreed to let them use the new bridge under strict conditions. Each household paid a monthly toll for maintenance, and modifications or inspections without my written approval. Emergency access only during storms or repairs, and most importantly, a public acknowledgement, posted on their website and newsletter, that the bridge and access road were private property belonging to me. They signed without argument. When I handed them digital gate passes, the new president shook my hand. "We won't forget this lesson," he said quietly. "I hope not," I replied. Bridges connect people, unless you're stupid enough to tear them down. Months passed. Life returned to normal. Cars crossed the bridge carefully now. Residents waved when they saw me fishing by the creek. Even the kids from the subdivision would come by, sometimes tossing pebbles in the water. The tension faded. Then one afternoon, I received an envelope, a glossy letter from a real estate company offering to buy my entire property for triple what I paid for it. The HOA wanted to acquire it to prevent future conflicts. I laughed for 5 straight minutes before tossing it in the fireplace. Some bridges can be rebuilt. Some lessons can't. A year later, a journalist reached out. She was writing a book about ordinary homeowners standing up to HOAs. She wanted my story. When she asked me how it all started, I told her, "They tore down my bridge." "And what did you do?" she asked. I smiled. "I made sure they never crossed it again, without paying the price." Now, when I stand on that bridge at sunset, the steel warm under my hands, I think about what my father told me when I was a kid. Land isn't just dirt, son. It's boundaries between right and wrong, between yours and theirs. Back then, I didn't understand. Now I do. They thought my bridge was just wood and nails. They thought my land was just space to use. But they forgot the oldest rule in the book. Don't mess with a man who owns the only road out. When I bought the property on Birch Hollow Lane, I didn't think I was walking into a war zone. It was supposed to be peaceful. 10 acres of old farmland, a quiet gravel driveway, and a view of the hills that could calm even the worst day. The real estate agent called it rustic charm, but what I saw was freedom. The only thing separating my land from the rest of the neighborhood was a narrow private drive, a single-lane road that wound down from the highway, passed through my front gate, and curved around a patch of pine trees before opening up to a newly built subdivision. I didn't mind them using it. It had always been the shared route, even before the HOA bought up the surrounding parcels. For the first year, we coexisted fine. I kept to my land, mowed the grass by the road, and waved to the neighbors as they passed. Then the HOA president, a woman named Diane Brooks, moved in, and everything changed. First, Diane came across as pleasant, maybe even neighborly. She brought over cookies one afternoon and mentioned how excited she was to have someone with land nearby. But even then, I noticed her tone, the kind of friendliness that sounds rehearsed, like she was checking boxes. A few weeks later, she dropped by again, this time holding a clipboard. "Mr. Hayes," she began, "we've noticed that your gravel driveway is causing dust to blow into the subdivision. We'd appreciate it if you paved it." "It's a private drive. My property. You're welcome to pave your side if you want." She smiled tightly. "But the whole community uses it. It's only fair." "I don't recall anyone asking my permission to use it," I replied. That was the first time I saw the flash in her eyes. The one that told me she wasn't used to being told no. 2 weeks later, I received my first violation notice. Printed on HOA letterhead, notice of noncompliance. Gravel and debris from your driveway have entered community grounds. Immediate remediation is required. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. I called Diane right away. Diane, I said, you do realize my driveway isn't part of your community? She sighed, exasperated. Well, technically, it's the only access road into the neighborhood. We consider it shared infrastructure. Consider it whatever you want, I said. Legally, it's mine. That should have been the end of it. But Diane didn't like losing control. A month later, I woke up to find orange cones lined along the edge of my driveway and a roadwork in progress sign planted near my fence. At the bottom of the hill, a paving crew was pouring asphalt. I stormed down, waving my arms. What the hell is this? The foreman looked at his clipboard. We're resurfacing the road for the Birch Hollow HOA. You the owner? Yes. And you're trespassing. He froze mid-step. Ma'am, we were told this was public access. It's private, I said, holding up my deed. Now pack it up before I call the sheriff. They didn't argue. By the end of the day, the crew was gone, but the damage was done. The HOA had poured about 20 feet of asphalt before leaving, an ugly black patch leading to nowhere. The next morning, Diane sent an email. We tried to improve the road for everyone's benefit. If you're unwilling to cooperate, we'll proceed without your involvement. That's when I decided to fight back, the right way. I spent the next week digging through county records, maps, and deeds. The results were even better than I expected. Not only was the entire driveway mine, but so was the land beneath it, right up to the community's entry sign. The HOA had no easement, no right of passage. They were essentially trespassing every single day they drove across it. The next morning, I installed a steel gate, 12 feet wide, with reinforced hinges and a keypad lock. A sign hung across it in bold black letters. Private property. Access by permission. O&LY within an hour. The HOA Facebook page exploded. Residents were furious. Cars lined up outside the gate, horns blaring. Delivery trucks couldn't get through. Kids missed school, and I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching chaos unfold. By noon, Diane arrived in her SUV, red-faced and fuming. She stormed up to my fence, waving papers. Mr. Hayes, this is illegal, she shouted. Actually, I said, holding up my own stack of documents, it's perfectly legal. You've been trespassing on private property for over a year. This is a neighborhood road. No, I said calmly, it's my driveway. Always has been. She glared. You can't just block an entire community from access. You can't just pave my land without permission, I shot back. Maybe next time you'll ask before acting like you own everything you see. By the end of the week, I had a lawyer send a cease and desist notice to the HOA. It demanded $75,000 in damages for unauthorized construction, plus a formal written apology. Their lawyer replied with a threat of their own, to sue for obstruction of community infrastructure. The county stepped in next, trying to mediate. A surveyor came out, checked the maps, and confirmed exactly what I'd said. The road, the gate, the soil beneath it. All of it was mine. The look on Diane's face when the county official read the report was priceless. Still, she wasn't done. 2 days later, I woke to find my gate covered in graffiti, big red letters spelling selfish land hog and community enemy. That same day, someone cut the lock clean off. I replaced it within hours and installed motion-activated cameras along the driveway. The footage showed 2 teenage boys from the subdivision vandalizing the gate. One of them, Diane's own son. When I sent the video to the sheriff's department, Diane came knocking that evening, pale and trembling. Please don't press charges, she said. They're just kids. I crossed my arms. Then maybe the adults in this neighborhood should learn not to set bad examples. Her voice wavered. What do you want? I smiled. Glad you asked. My conditions were simple. The HOA would fund the full repaving of my driveway to my standards. They would install new signage acknowledging it as private property, access by agreement, They would pay a yearly maintenance fee for continued use. And they would issue a public apology for trespassing and vandalism. Diane's expression shifted from anger to defeat. That's extortion. No, I said evenly. That's consequences. She didn't answer. 2 days later, I got a call from her lawyer agreeing to the settlement. Repaving started the next week, this time under my supervision. I hired the crew, chose the materials, and stood by as they worked. The HOA paid for every inch. When it was done, the driveway gleamed black and smooth, better than any road in the neighborhood. At the end of the project, I added one more touch, a metal sign at the base of the gate reading, "Welcome to Birch Hollow Estates. Access courtesy of M. Hayes." Every car that entered had to pass it. For months afterward, I lived in peace again. Residents waved when they drove by. Some even stopped to thank me. But not Diane. She avoided me entirely, embarrassed after the apology letter went public. She stepped down as HOA president soon after. Her replacement, a man named Kevin, turned out to be much more reasonable. He asked to meet and discuss future cooperation. We sat on my porch with 2 cups of coffee. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "we'd like to establish an official access agreement."
Permanent.
Legal. That way, something like this never happens again. I nodded. That's smart. We drafted a contract giving the HOA a non-transferable easement, renewable yearly, contingent on payment and maintenance. It made me the sole gate authority. Kevin laughed when I handed him the final copy. "I guess you won the war." I smiled. I didn't start it. But Diane wasn't done. A few months later, word got around that she was trying to petition the county to designate the road as public. If she succeeded, I'd lose my exclusive control. I went straight to the hearing, armed with documentation. The council chamber was packed, homeowners on one side, me on the other. Diane stood and spoke first. "This road is essential for our residents' access. It serves the public good and should be maintained as such." When it was my turn, I stood slowly. "Council members, my family has owned that land for 40 years. The HOA paved part of it without permission, vandalized my gate, and ignored every warning. There is no easement, no legal claim, no right of passage. They're asking to take private land because they don't like the word no." The room went silent. County chair glanced at the map, then at Diane. "Petition denied," he said, and I walked out to the sound of clapping. After that, everything changed. The HOA backed off completely. Some residents even invited me to their block parties. The bitterness faded into an uneasy respect. Every time I drove through my gate, the keypad clicked open like a reminder. Boundaries exist for a reason. The following spring, I planted a row of cherry trees along the driveway. By the time they bloomed, the road looked like something out of a postcard. Pink petals falling across the black asphalt, sunlight breaking through the branches. One afternoon, a delivery driver pulled up and said, "Man, this is the nicest private drive I've ever seen." I laughed. Took a war to get it that way. Months later, I got a letter from Diane. No threats, no demands, just a short handwritten note. "Mr. Hayes, I've moved away. I wanted to say I was wrong. The neighborhood learned its lesson. I hope you enjoy the peace you earned, Diane." I folded it and put it in my desk drawer. Now, every time I see a car roll slowly past my gate, I think of how close they came to taking something that wasn't theirs. They blocked my driveway. They paved my land. They tried to claim what I built, but in the end, they learned what every HOA should remember. You don't mess with the person who owns the road beneath your wheels.